Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today I'm going to be taking a look at the quick start rules for Dune RPG. My recommendation is that if you are using the starter set, you should use the quick start rules along with that. I think it makes an ideal combination for convention play. Without further ado, let's start taking a look at those quick start rules. So here we have it's a 32-page quick start rules. This comes free with this came actually free with the purchase of the starter kit. So this was linked in there. Plus, you can get the quick start rules for free just from the Modifius website as well. So, and this one comes with the starting adventure of Worm Sign. So, lead designer is Nathan Dowell, and other writers are Andrew Peregrine. Jason Doral is the line editor, proofreading, and so on and so forth. So, a whole bunch of people involved with this project, and Chief Creative Officer is Chris Birch, and so on. So, here we go. So, the introduction. Welcome to the last years of the Imperium, an era tens of thousands of years in the future. In this time, the known universe is ruled by the Emperor of the Great Houses. It is a feudal place where noble families rule whole planets in the service of the Emperor, but politic ruthlessly in the shadows of power and control. Sorry, I'm reading terrible today. Anyway, if you watched any of the Dune movies, perhaps the original in 1984-ish or 5-ish or somewhere in there, or the more recent 2021 and 2023, you'll be familiar with the background for it. You might have also read the books as well, and so you'll be well versed in the lore and the setting and even the characters of Dune. So, what you need to play, you need 20-sided dice, preferably 2, but as many as and not more than 5 you will need. If each player sitting at the table has their own 5 d20s, you're kind of set to go. Tokens, you need something to keep track of momentum and determination points and the threat the game master has acquired. So any form of tokens that you might have. They could be the tokens that come from the starter kit, or they can be any 2 different color chips that you might have. Poker chips will work fine. Paper and pencils, and a pre-generated character, which you can print out, and I will show you those pre-gen characters as well. The basic rules of the game. As you might expect in a 2d20 system, when you attempt an action, you can roll 2d20 to see if you succeed. Each die that rolls equal to or less than the target number is considered a success. If you roll a 1, the dice counts as 2 successes, a critical success. If you roll a 20, that die gives you a complication. The target number is the sum of the skill that most suits the task and the drive that most suits why you are doing it. Usually the game master decides the skill and the player decides the drive. The game master decides the difficulty of the task, a value ranging from 0 to 5, but usually at least 1, which is how many successes you need to get to perform the action. If you get more successes than you need, you gain momentum. points. If you need help, you can spend momentum points to gain more dice and determination points to help your results. However, the Game Master can spend threat to aid non-player characters and make actions more difficult. Each character is composed of several elements which serve to represent and define who the character is and how they interact with the world they inhabit. Skills. Each character has a rating in each of the 5 skills, each rated from 4 to 8. Battle. Your character's skill at arms and their awareness of danger. Use battle when your character is fighting, when seeking to avoid danger, when they plan a battle, when they try to recall some fact about the methods or history of conflict. Communicate. Your character's ability to skillfully engage in conversation, discussion, and debates. All right. And whenever they're trying to attempt to persuade someone, deceive others, so on and so forth. Discipline. Your character's ability to influence and control their own mind and body and how they focus and concentrate on complex tasks. Discipline is when you're attempting to resist, attempting to subvert body or mind, such as poisons, drugs, and mental influence, as well as to suppress instincts and reflexes when subjected to extreme pain or hardship. Move. Move. Your character's mobility, their ability to overcome physical obstacles. Move to walk, run, jump, swim, climb, or otherwise maneuver in situations where speed, precision, stealth, or care are necessary. Understand. Your character's ability to take and process information and to recall and apply that knowledge effectively at a later point. Use understand when attempting to discern details about a situation nearby, to search an area thoroughly and effectively, to perform research, to recall things your character has learned in the past, to reach conclusions and deductions from things they know, and so on. Focuses. Focuses increase your character's chance of scoring a critical success on tests using skill. If a focus applies to the action your character is performing, such as short blades, when using a knife, you score a critical success, 2 successes on any die roll equal to or less than your character's skill instead of a 1. Duty. Use duty when it is your character's responsibility to get the job done and when others are counting on the character to succeed. This might be in the service of the house or the people under their command. Faith is the moral expectation of religion and the character's spiritual needs. It shows their dedication to the higher power and the guiding hand of destiny. But a high faith drive does not always mean a religious or spiritual dedication, as some place their faith is in their faction or friends as much as they will a god. Use faith when your character has a moral imperative to act, whether from the religion or personal values. Justice is the drive towards balance and fairness, but also the will to redress injustices. It often serves the law and the common good, but it can just as easily uphold bad laws and be used as an excuse for revenge. Use justice when you're doing an action is simply the right thing to do, legally if not morally. Power is the pursuit of the greater influence authority or control over the universe around them. It is your character's ego representing their belief in their own moral authority and their right to take what they want. Use power when doing actions serves your character's agenda in some way, either directly or indirectly. Truth is the desire of knowledge and the need to uncover or define that which is true. It is dedicated to revealing the right answers, even if they are uncomfortable or even dangerous. Use truth when your character's curiosity has gotten the better of them, or when they absolutely must know the answer to enhance their own knowledge and understanding. Players will often try to pick their highest drive as often as possible. This is perfectly fine, as their characters naturally try to play to their strengths. But the game master may decide this makes them predictable and grant their enemies an appropriate bonus. Sometimes the game master may also rule that certain situations insist on certain drives or even precludes them. Traits, complications, and assets. Characters and assets offer traits. A trait can be used in two ways: to allow a test where one might not otherwise be possible, or to make a test easier or harder. So you might use the trait criminal to allow your character to take a test to contact the underworld on a strange planet. When they finally make contact, that trait might make the difficulty of convincing a crime boss to do business with them one step lower. Another form of trait is an asset. These are items and contacts that work in the same way as traits. Having blackmail papers might be required to blackmail a political rival. Having a knife makes it easier to win in a fight. Complications are negative traits gained from bad dice rolls or the game master spending threat. They tend to last for a scene and are used in the same way as traits, except they make things harder and allow non-player characters to take advantage of your character's weaknesses. Difficulty settings. So when a player asks to make a skill test, the game master should determine difficulty of the task, which is rated from 0 to 5. All right, and this is pretty self-explanatory if you're dealing with any kind of a game system that uses difficulty settings. So difficulty 0 tests are basically something that is not going to be impacted by any real level of difficulty. Skill test procedures. The game master usually selects one skill to be used. Then the player should pick one drive that they think appropriate, guided by their drive statements. These are added together to become the target number. They may also select an applicable focus. If they have one, the game master sets a difficulty for the test. This is normally between 1 and 5, but it can be higher or it can be as low as 0. Some skill tests, they have a default difficulty listed in the rules, but traits, threat, and other factors can increase or decrease difficulty. The player and the game master should also finalize any traits that are applying before moving on to the rolling of the dice. Take 2 d20s plus an additional d20 you've bought for this skill test. This is your dice pool for the test. Then roll your dice. Each d20 that rolls equal to or less than the target number scores a single success. Each die that rolls a 1 is a critical success, which scores 2 successes. If a focus applies, then each die that rolls equal to or less than the skill being used scores a critical success. Each die that rolls a 20 causes a complication. If the number of success scores equal or exceeds the difficulty of the skill test, then you have passed. If the number of successes scored is less than the difficulty, then you have failed. If the number of scored successes are greater than the difficulty, each success above the difficulty becomes a single point of momentum. The Game Master describes the outcome of the skill test, and if the skill test was successful, you may spend momentum to improve the result further. After this, the effects of any complications are applied. Improving the odds. You can improve the odds with momentum. Momentum can be spent to assist the test, such as buying extra dice before the skill test. Threat can be generated for the Game Master instead of spending momentum. Determination represents the characters putting their all into an action. If you spend a point of determination, choose one of the d20s in your dice pool. That die is considered to have rolled a 1 and does not need to be rolled. It thus scores a critical success automatically. Your character begins play with 1 point of determination and may never have more than 3 points of determination. Assistance. When another character actively assists your character's actions, the Game Master may limit how many characters may exist a given test. Each assistant selects a drive and skill to create a target number of their own based on how they are helping and rolls a d20. Assistants cannot buy extra dice themselves. Any success they generate are added to the skill test of the character is attempting. So long as they score at least one success of your own, any complications from anyone else in the test apply to everyone. Okay. Momentum. Momentum basically means that if you exceeded the number of successes you're needed to, you will generate momentum. The momentum pool cannot contain more than 6 momentum points at any time. At the end of the scene, 1 point of momentum from the group pool is lost. Common uses of momentum. Buying d20s to improve your odds of through threat. Create a trait. Allows you to define a new fact about the scene or situation. Spending 2 points of momentum either creates a brand new trait, changes an existing one, or removes one in current play. When you create a trait, you must relate to the action your character has just attempted, and it must be something that could reasonably result from the action. Creating an asset works in the same way as creating a trait, but there are some limitations to the kinds of assets you can create. Assets created in this way are temporary and cease to exist at the end of the scene. Whatever the asset represents is discarded or ceases to be useful. You may spend 2 momentum to make an asset created during a scene permanent, in which case it is added to the list of assets on your character sheet. Obtaining information allows you to learn more about a scene and situation. Each point of momentum you spend allows you to ask the Game Master one question about the current situation. The Game Master must answer this question truthfully, but the answer doesn't need to be complete. Partial or incomplete answers that leave room for further questions are more common. The answers must reflect the skill your character has used to gain information. Threat. As players' characters generate and spend momentum, the game master generates and spends their own resource, threat. The game master makes use of threat to alter scenes, empower non-player characters, and generally make things challenging, perilous, or unpredictable for the player characters. Threat is a method by which the game and the game master builds tension. The larger the threat pool, the greater the likelihood of something endangers or threatens the player characters. The game master typically begins each adventure with 2 points of threat for each player present. All right, so imagine if you have 5 players sitting at the table. The game master is going to have their threat pool sitting right in the center of the table, so everyone can see just how much threat is there. And then, as the game master expends those threats to make things more challenging, the players will see that it will rise to tension as the players see that that pool is increasing over time. They can rest assured at some point the game master is going to start spending those threat points to give advantage towards the NPCs that they might be in conflict with, or to make the tasks that they're attempting to do even more complicated. So it's a really interesting dynamic, very visual at the table as well. So I certainly recommend having that pool sitting there right in the center of the table for all the players to see, because they're going to realize that, hey, there's some pending threat that I am potentially going to be facing while going through this action. Adding to threat, threat can be added to the following ways: buying D20s. As noted earlier in this chapter, players may buy bonus D20s for their own skill tests, but that adds points to the threat instead of spending momentum. As normal, no more than 3 dice can be bought, and the cost increases for each dice. The first cost 1, the second 2, and the third 3. So let's say you wanted to buy 3, as a player, you want to buy 3 D20s in order to make your chances much more possible, but you had no momentum to spend. You are giving 3, up to 3 threat points for the game master to put in his or her pool. All right, so you're giving yourself a great advantage, but later on, that's going to potentially come back to haunt you when the game master decides to use that threat that you contributed to the pool to use further down the line. Complications. Whenever a player character suffers 1 or more complications on a skill test, they or the game master may choose to add 2 points of threat to the pool, ignoring the complication. All right. Escalation. At times, the game master or the rules may state that the specific action or decision risks escalating the situation, making it more dangerous or unpredictable. If the character performs an action that risks escalation, they immediately add 1 point of threat to the pool. Threatening circumstances. The environment or the circumstances of a new scene may be threatening or perilous enough for the game master's warrant of adding 1 or 2 points of threat to the pool automatically. Similarly, some non-player characters may generate threat simply by arriving in response to changes in the situation. Non-player character momentum. Non-player character with unspent momentum cannot save it as player characters can. as they don't have a group momentum pool. Instead, a non-player character may add 1 point to the threat for every momentum that they have remaining. Spending threat. Game masters can spend threat in several ways. They can buy d20s. They can increase the difficulty. I'm just summarizing these now. Non-player character threat spends. So the non-player characters can spend the threat the same way that player characters spend momentum. Non-player character complications. If a non-player character suffers a complication, the game master may buy off the complication by spending 2 points of threat. And traits. The game master may change, remove, or create a trait by spending 2 points of threat. This must come naturally from some part of the current situation. Environmental effects and narrative changes. The game master may trigger or cause problems with the scene of the environment. Rival house action. You can have a situation where a rival house becomes involved in the current scene in some way. Contests and extended tests. There are 2 other ways you might want to make the test, and both figure heavily in the conflict system. All right, so a contest is when the character is facing another character rather than a situation of static obstacle. In this case, the skill and the ability of the opposing character defines the difficulty. The game master makes a skill test for the opposing character using threat as necessary, and the amount of successes the roll achieves become the difficulty for the player character to beat them. So basically, it is 2 competing combatants, let's say. Let's say one is trying to defend and the other is trying to attack, and then the defender is going to generate enough difficulty for the other attacker's ability to hit them. Gaining information. When a character wishes to generally investigate a scene but not have a specific question in mind, the game master can call for a difficulty 0 test using the appropriate skill. This allows the opportunity to gain momentum, representing the research the characters have done before they start making more detailed tests. We will go into conflict. So this is starting to, this is starting to get to the point where you're actually making the rolls now, and so you're actually seeing how conflict is both created in the scenes and how they are resolved and through what methods or forms of conflict they're taking place. So there's the nature of conflict. All right, and so conflict covers a multitude of different forms of contest, from physical fights to intrigue and assassination. Conflict is not just about physical combat, and any methods to defeat their enemy with any tool is potentially a conflict. The ability and the skill of each combatant is more important than the actual weapons used. A knife kills as well as a sword, although different weapons can provoke different advantages in different situations. Each test in the conflict is an encounter and an exchange of blows or political moves, and does not represent a single thrust of a blade. Assets are often essential to allow the conflict to occur at all. While the fighter might choose to encourage a foe unarmed, it is impossible to blackmail someone into something to blackmail them with. All right. So an asset or trait may often be required to make a conflict possible. All right. Conflicts do not need to cause wounds or physical hurt a target. Many things might lead to their defeat, such as exhaustion, lack of resources, or losing allies or the respect of their peers. Complications suffered through a conflict represent actual hurt any combatant suffers. They make winning more difficult, but who got hurt the most does not define victory. Defeat does not mean death, while it often does in Dune. Enemies can yield, be exiled, knocked out, or stripped of resources. So forms of conflict, you'll have dueling, you'll have skirmishes, you have open warfare, you have espionage, and you have intrigue. The basics of conflict is resolved using the extended role with the difficulty set by the character's opponent and the same way as in the contest. Who goes first? Actions alternate between the player character's side in the conflict and their enemy's side. When a character's side has a turn, any single character on the side who has not acted can make an action. They then pass to the other side. If the player character has made a successful attack, then they may spend 2 momentum points or add 2 threat to keep the initiative. Enemy non-player characters may spend 2 points of threat to do this. If they keep initiative, then the characters may take an extra action, immediately adding +1 difficulty to their test. They attempt or allow an allied character to take a turn before handing over to the opposing side. All right, so this is a really interesting feature. It's like you can spend momentum in order to essentially gain another action in initiative. On your initiative side, and so and then it would then pass to the other side. So that's a really interesting way to spend momentum, is to give yourself a second opportunity for an action. Resisting defeat. Some characters are harder to overcome than others, possessing a limited ability to fend off the attacks, literal or figurative. That would lay them low once per scene. If a character would be defeated, you may choose to resist defeat. Resisting defeat prevents the defeat from occurring. Your character remains active in the scene. All player characters have this option, as do all notable and major non-player characters and all notable supporting characters. When you choose to resist defeat, it costs 1 momentum point or adds 1 threat and causes you to suffer a complication. Non-player characters opposing the players spend threat instead. This complication could cause the loss of one of your assets, an advantage the enemy has gained over you, or some hindrance suffered avoiding the defeat. Assets. So there are several types of assets. There are tangible assets, is one that has a physical presence and which has a degree of permanence to it. A weapon is a tangible asset, as is a unit of troops, a surveillance system, etc. An intangible asset is one that has no physical presence, a bribed guard, the leverage from having other potential trading partners, etc. Zones. If you wish to complicate the conflict, you can introduce zones and movement assets within them to maximize their effectiveness in a deadly game of chess. First, the game master divides up the area of the conflict into several different zones depending on the conflict. These represent things such as dueling, skirmishes, warfare, espionage, and intrigue. moving an asset. When you take your turn, you may take a single action to move an asset or use an asset. You may attempt to move in a subtle way, trying to avoid attention, or you may move in a bold way, a manner that draws attention and provokes a response. Subtle and boldly, they go into that. Using an asset, attack an opponent with the intent of harming or defeating them. Attempt to remove an opponent's asset from play. Attempt to create new trait for the scene or a new asset for your character or ally. Attempt to overcome an obstacle or hindrance in the environment, or attempt to gain information about the situation, or attempt to remove a trait or similar complication from an ally, or to aid a defeated ally. There are defensive assets, targeted assets, creating a trait or asset, and finally aiding an ally. So they go into details as to what each of those are. And there you have the basic rules, right? So that is the core of the game system. As you become familiar with it and you go through this, a few times, you're going to pick it up fairly quickly. It reads much more complicated than it actually is, and there are several cheat sheets that you can actually create for the players and hand out to them ahead of time. I'm just going to switch views here. So I find that using the Quickstart rules is more ideal for like a one shot when you're introducing new players to the game system. For convention play, it really does streamline a lot of things because as complicated as that might have sounded going through just the first time, perhaps hearing it and even reading it, if you are reading along with me, the core rulebook just adds so many other layers to it, and includes more detail to it as well, so that it makes things perhaps a little bit more clear how they interact with each other, and it gets that going. But this is a much more simplified way of presenting it, and it is only about 8 pages of actual rules to be read through and checked out. So I would recommend every player having at least a copy of those 8 pages well ahead of time, before they actually get into the gameplay if possible, and give them a chance to read that over, and then that way they'll be ready to move forward in a situation. So if I'm running this at a convention, that's exactly what I would do. I will give them those 8 pages and say, just glance through this and make sure that you're fairly clear as to what's going on. And then as I'm running the adventure, we'll focus, or I will focus them on doing some of the different tasks at hand, and really do experience during that first play, experience the various different challenges of going through the system, and so give them a taste of each of those each of those motives for doing things and such. So it's a system that you can see is heavy on conflict, but not necessarily heavy on physical conflict, and that's a big difference here. It's a very there's a lot of challenge that is mental challenge in in your characters going through what they're what they're doing in their adventure, if you want to call it that. I like to think of it more as they're going to have an objective that they're trying to meet, and there will be various levels of nuance that goes into how they actually uh, achieve that objective, successfully achieve that objective. So really looks cool. I'm excited about this game system and actually running it, and all of these components coming together. The starter kit, which I've done a previous video on, and now the quick start rules, and then I will start to go through the core rule book and start showing you how that will further enhance what these last two videos are going to cover as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know this one ran kind of long because I went through virtually the whole thing there in greater detail than I typically do through our first look. So, but feel free to revisit this. Feel free to ask any specific questions that you wish, and I will be covering the core rule book over the next couple of weeks, going through each of those major areas of questions that you might have. So you all enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen sometime soon, and or at a convention, which I have several coming up over the next couple of months. And as always, thanks for joining. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.